Welcome, everybody. I hope you are here for the education update with the North Carolina Legislative Short Session. We're very excited tonight to have three of our elected officials to talk a little bit about what's going on in the General Assembly right now. We're particularly interested in some of the bills and, of course, the budget. The budget is all over the news. And so we are fortunate that we had this scheduled and we'll be able to talk about it. So I want to take a few seconds to introduce everyone joining us tonight. First, my name is Yvonne Brannon. I'm Chair of Public Schools First NC. The moderator tonight will be Lynn Edmonds. Lynn is the Director for Outreach and Extension for Public Schools First NC. And now let me take just a second to introduce our panelists tonight. And we are going to record this meeting. And we are going to try to make sure we leave some time at the end for your questions. If some of your questions don't get answered, you can email us later. We'll get them answered for you and we'll get back to you. But now let's go ahead and get started. So Representative Phil Rubin, thank you for being here tonight. He represents Northwest Raleigh, District 40.
Yvonne, can you advance your slide? I don't have that control.
Oh, well, wait now, Phil. I'm sorry. Lynn knocked you out of first place. So we have to go back and introduce Rodney. I have apologies to our audience. I have a sheet of paper that's not in order with our slides. I apologize, but we are so proud to have Representative Rodney Pierce here, representing North Carolina House District 27, which is Halifax, Northampton, and Warren counties. He is a educator. It is so good for us education advocates to know that we have some educators at the General Assembly to advocate and explain many days why bills matter or why they don't work. I put a little personal comment in there that he also was a student a long time ago in Halifax County. He'll tell you about that perhaps later. He was one of the original, what they call Leandro kids. When that lawsuit was filed, he was a student in Halifax County. Next, I want to introduce Representative Rubin. I started earlier. He's a Wake County representative. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney and North Carolina Special Deputy Attorney General. He's new this year to the General Assembly, but if you keep an eye on him and look at some of the things that he's been doing and the bills he's been filing, he did not take any time, waste a moment to jump in and get involved in advocating for public education. And last, welcome Senator Joyce Waddell, a person that has been involved in public education for over 30 years. Dr. Waddell has her doctorate and she used it extensively when she was a teacher, she was a principal, she was a curriculum specialist in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools. Then she joined the school board, and now since 2014, she has been in the Senate representing Mecklenburg County. So we're really thrilled to have these experienced people with us tonight, and we're going to go ahead and Lynn, if you would start the conversation.
Thank you, and thank you all for being with us. It's an honor to have you. So y'all finally had some action over there this week. So I want to go around and just get your thoughts on the budget. I will start with Senator Waddell and then head to Representative Pierce and then Representative Rubin, if you would, please.
As we begin to look at the budget, we see some things in there that we had been working for a long time. We see increase in teacher pay. We see increase in what we can expect over long years and we had been working for. But we also see that it's not doing enough in the long run. When we think of what has happened in the past and some of the inequities that were in the past. And it's hard to, when you say 8%, is it really 8%? We think of what didn't happen, the cost of living, and those increases that did not happen throughout the years. Is it really 8%? We know it's an increase, and teachers are excited. But what we have to do is to take an in-depth look and measure what happened in the past, how we can catch up, and what's happening now. So we're excited about that. We're excited about making a difference. And teachers came just a little while ago, last week. And many of them have continued to come to the General Assembly and asked, we want more money. We want money for school psychologists. We want more money for our cafeteria workers. And most of all, since I am a retiree, we're disappointed because retirees are not getting what we thought we were going to get. When we say a bonus, retirees want a cost of living, a COLA, it's called. Retirees have given tirelessly of time and energy. And like when I entered the profession, it was so wonderful because what we were saying, this is not a job, it's a career. It's a career that we can depend on because when we retire, we know we'll be taken care of. Retirees are disappointed. I've been standing up for retirees ever since I've been in the North Carolina General Assembly. And they've come and they've asked. It seems like they've been forgotten. So we got to do more for that group of people. When we think about increase in everything, medicines, insurance, cost of food, retirees have given their all, and they need to get what they said they were going to get. Oftentimes, we think that retirees were not going to be living long enough to reap the benefits, but that's not true. They're here, and we must provide. You talk about early mornings, meeting buses. You're talking about not only being a classroom teacher, but serving as surrogate parents for many of the students. We're talking about cleaning. We're talking about late afternoons. And now we're talking about a bonus. Retirees need a cost of living. So that's continued and continued over the years to make a difference. When we think about the investments that's being made with the funds that are coming in, I know we're doing the best that we can in the General Assembly, but we got to do more.
Thank you for lifting that up. And we count on our retirees for so many things. And when you do consider those factors that you mentioned, the cost of living increases with healthcare and medicine. And now we are in a new war. So fuel prices are going up. I mean, everything is going up. And so I think the headline has been all about the 8%, but you bring up an excellent point about retirees being left out and how much impact that 8% really has when it comes down to individuals, paychecks and personal budgets. Representative Pierce, what are your thoughts about the budget?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for having me, as well as my distinguished colleagues. Very honored to be on a panel with the both of them. Thank the world of Phil and Dr. Waddell, as you said, is the GOAT. So very happy to be up here with them. I want to echo what my colleague said, Senator Waddell, is just that being someone who's actually in the classroom, dealing with now freshmen, high schoolers, on a daily basis, and talking to some of my colleagues. It was funny leading up to the budget. I'd be talking to them, and they were like, "When we gonna have a budget? When we gonna have a budget, Mr. Pierce?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. I'm not sure. I know it's late, but I'm not sure." And talking to some of the front office personnel, I want my raise, Mr. Pierce. I want my raise. Joking, but at the same time, you can see how, as Senator Waddell said, people are hurting. She talked about retirees, and a lot of your retirees, excuse me, I saw it in some of the comments people were leaving. A lot of them are coming back, and they're either working or they're volunteering in schools, you know, and to not give them any type of significant COLA. I mean, first of all, you didn't give them a COLA. right? There's not even a COLA included. It's a one-time bonus. But if you were to give them a COLA, making it a significant one to keep up with the cost of living, to me, that's just a slap in the face. That's disrespectful to people who gave decades of service to this state under the belief, as Dr. Waddell said, that they were going to be taken care of. And as someone who benefited, who was raised by educators, raised by people who taught in the classroom and became administrators, and someone who has maternal figures in his life who were his classroom teachers to this day. I know some of those people who go back and teach, and they'll tell you quick, these kids ain't like y'all. They're different. They're not like y'all were. But one of the things they also offer as retirees, I know she was talking about being surrogate mothers to the children. They're surrogate mothers to beginning teachers, surrogate parents, mentors. Sometimes central office will have you in a BT program, and that's all well and good, but those people aren't there with you every day. Those retirees who have come back to teach or have come back to volunteer, you might see them more than you see your actual mentor. And so those people take you under their wing, teach you the ropes, teach you how to conduct yourself when you're in a parent teacher conference, or when you're in an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting, how to have your paperwork intact. Those are the things I learned from people who retired and came back and were still giving of their time. Then I think about teachers trying to afford the cost of living. I think about childcare, right? I think about, as Dr. Waddell said, food insecurity. There are teachers working two or three side jobs just to make ends meet, which is ridiculous. When, as she said, I keep piggybacking off of her though. This is supposed to be a career. This is supposed to be something that I can do where I can take care of all of my bills, save a little something, and still have time, or excuse me, still have funds if I have a family to do things with my partner or with my children. You know, that's the assumption or the belief that you go in there with. And to not have that in a profession that literally creates the other professions. One of the things I like to say is every profession starts in a classroom. It always starts in a classroom. Always. We owe a lot to the people who cultivated us as teachers, as our educators. We owe them a lot, and we can name all of them from grade K through 12. Think about that. We all know who our teachers were. So it shows you the impact they have on our lives. Think about the law. What does the law say? What is it that feels the lawyer? Is it loco parenti? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, in the place of the parent.
Exactly. When you're not with your birth parents or guardians and you're at that school, that is literally who is your parent. They are responsible for your safety, first and foremost, and your education. So that is the thing that I think of.
Thank you so much. Um, Representative Rubin, your thoughts.
Yeah. First of all, let me just say how privileged I am to be here tonight. And on this panel, I'm also intimidated because you may have noticed from the bios that I'm among two legendary educators, and I am not one. But everything that Rodney said, and I learned so much from Rodney in the house about education and everything, is about how all professions come from teachers. And I have been molded by so many great teachers and professors in my life. And so I very much believe that public education is the bedrock. And turning to the budget, first of all, I won't repeat what my colleague said, but agree with all of it. And so what I'll focus on is then what should this look like? Because 8%, that's great, except when we've had years of pay raises that are too small, that's only part of paying the debt back, right? And same with the COLA increase. Great to get a COLA increase. It's been almost a decade since we've had one, and even this one doesn't cover inflation from the last year. So the thought that's on my mind is how do we get to a place where we have a sustainable future for educators, for retirees? I saw someone posted in the chat that we're the only state in the Southeast that doesn't have a codified COLA for retired state employees. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need, is to get to a place where it doesn't require the largesse of the legislature for a COLA. A COLA just happens because we've invested in that future, right? We've made that happen. And same thing with teacher pay raises. It actually shouldn't be hung up on the politics of the General Assembly to see whether teachers get a pay raise or not, and whether it's meager or big. We should be setting ourselves up to track a future of a profession for teachers. And in a profession, you know that you're going to get job growth, and that comes with pay growth. And so we need to be in a position to make promises to our educators and to all the support staff in schools that you're not just going to have to hope and pray every year that maybe the legislature takes notice and decides to do something this year. It needs to be a guarantee that you have and you can rely on. And that's going to take a very different way of thinking about everything in North Carolina, including our revenue. And that's going to be the big topic now going into November, is how do we have enough revenue as a state to do these things that we need to do and invest in our future? And the proposal on the table as part of this budget deal is to permanently cripple North Carolina, to permanently make it unable to ever solve these problems, because a constitutional cap at 3.5% on income tax means we will always be in a place where we do not have the money to do the right thing. And that doesn't mean that I'm advocating for raising everybody's taxes. It means we need to be able to craft budgets that don't just look at, well, we cut all the money, we cut all the revenue, we have no money, I guess we'll figure out how to spend what we've got. We need to think about, what do we need to do to invest in a bright future for North Carolina, and figure out how the right and fair way to get that revenue to pay for it is. That's how companies budget. That's how families budget. That's how everyone does, except apparently the folks who run the North Carolina General Assembly. And so I am going to fight for all of this, and all of it is for, in the end, to make sure that we have a profession of teachers that can count on growth. And we have a lot of work to do. That's kind of the bottom line. This budget deal will look good on the surface, but it's just Band-Aids, and we need a lot more than Band-Aids.
I'm so glad that you brought up the tax proposals, because from my reading, there are even conservative think tanks and conservative leaning, people that would more usually be friendly to tax cuts and that kind of thing, but they're raising alarms and they're raising concern. Like, whoa, North Carolina, you're going too far, too fast, and you are really going to be in some serious trouble. And when those bells and whistles go off, I don't understand, and don't know that you can speak to this, but it's hard for me to understand how leadership in the General Assembly is not heeding those concerns from folks that are like-minded, for lack of a better way to put it. So since you brought that up, Representative Rubin, let's focus on that just a little bit about, I don't want to jump out of our lane off of education, but these tax cuts, if this goes on the ballot in November and these things come to pass, can you speak to how it really will harm public education? As that, what's our focus tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. Think about our budget right now. So North Carolina's budgets the past few years have been the smallest in terms of per capita, like based on the size of our population, in at least 50 years. So when you look at basically, and the chart that I looked at only goes back to 1975, so it may even be longer than that. But you can pick a year since Republicans have taken over, and any time before that, our revenue was a bigger percent of our economy than it is now. And in dollars and cents, what that means is we just have a lot less money. If we were taxing simply at the rate we were taxing before the Great Recession, when people were generally pretty happy with things, we'd have about 11, I think is the number, $11 billion a year more revenue. So whenever somebody tells you, oh, we can't afford a COLA, we can't afford to pay teachers more, we could easily do it with that revenue. And not only could we do it with that revenue, it'd be, okay, well, what do you want to do with the other 9? Right? Like, that's how much has been given away. And then the next question becomes, well, given away to who? And, because hey, maybe people will be thinking, hey, I've got a lot more money in my pocket. That's great. Average working family from the tax cuts we have in place now gets like 80 to 120 bucks from those income tax cuts. Meanwhile, in order to fund all this, because we've cut so much money from the budget, Republicans have had to push costs down to your counties, right? And that means your property taxes are going up, which means actually at the end of the day, for average working folks, including teachers, you're paying more money as a result of these tax cuts. You literally have less money. And that's not even getting into teacher salary, which has been stagnant because of these cuts too, right? And so when you put all that together, I think what we need to be fighting for is people should have more money in their pockets. Teachers should have more money in their pockets. But it's not as simple as slash taxes, everybody gets more money, because it turns out you have to invest in your future in order to make more money for people to have in their pockets. And the amendment that they want to cap income tax at 3.5% would mean that no future General Assembly could raise income tax even to the rate it is now. That's lower than it is now, which means that future, there's no coming back and saying, the people elected a different General Assembly, they want a different outcome. We'd be saying, we can't, we're not allowed to raise the revenue. And so it's really, really, really dangerous.
Yeah.
And, it's hard because that means you have to be in the position to fight against an amendment capping taxes. Because when you ask people, should we cap taxes? Everybody's like, heck yeah. But we're going to have to make that case, and we're going to have to become really good educators about it to the public.
Yeah. Senator Waddell, do you feel like your constituents have a sense of how these taxing cuts would cause, say the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system to have to go to the county to ask for more to fill these gaps?
Not only will they have to go to the county, but these tax, as we look at how it's written, and you see we had several counties that came forward with the bill. And what did they say to us? They said they didn't want to be included and asked to be exempted because they had just gone through taxes, reevaluations. And so as we look at Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and we are the second, sometimes the first largest school system in the state of North Carolina, it's going to have a real negative effect. Nobody wants it. And I'll tell you what, as you disaggregate the data and you look at the dollars and you look at the total cost, we have something called a rainy day fund that we've always put money in. Will we be able to sustain that rainy day fund for the purposes that it's intended for? Or will it be depleted? We got to think about that too. We also must think about, when we think about tax cuts and the 3.5%, who does it benefit most? Will it benefit the rich, the middle class, or those everyday working people? I don't think it's going to benefit the everyday working people. I think the beneficiaries would be your rich. We don't want this to be a class system where the top echelon benefits. This is the United States of America. This is the state of North Carolina, of the people, for the people, and by the people. And that shouldn't happen. So as we disaggregate that data and we look at the number of people we have in this state who will benefit most, we look at the dollars that they're making, it's going to be the rich. That's not what we want.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And to your point, corporations are doing off really, really well, right? Because their corporate income tax rate in North Carolina is already set in law to go to zero in 4 short years. And so it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that we are going to accept that corporations that do business in North Carolina will contribute nothing to our public goods and services, including public schools. Representative Pierce, do you feel like the public has an understanding of that on top of what is happening with the personal income tax proposals?
I honestly think sometimes, we're all just trying to get by living our lives every single day, and people don't have the time sometimes to properly educate themselves on the issues. And that's why it's so important for us as legislators and advocates such as yourselves and people on this webinar to do what we do. But I think the whole premise of this sort of underfunding of public education over the last several years, really over the last decade, is part of it. Because if I don't educate people properly, the one thing that I always remember being told in school growing up is we are trying to teach you to think critically, right? Critical thinking. That was a class I took my senior year. It was an SAT prep class. But if we can't teach children to think critically, then they will not be able to critique the government that they are paying taxes into or the government that they are electing people in to represent their interest. So when I think about corporate taxes being phased out, and as you said, corporations coming into our state and then not getting to pay their fair share, then if that's going to be the case, we need to stop bragging about how we're the number one state for business. We really need to. And then, when you talk about where those businesses are landing, um, they're not necessarily coming to rural North Carolina. They're not coming to Eastern North Carolina. I'm not saying they're not coming. We just had a very exciting announcement a few months back about a project coming to Hertford County, which has a lot of people excited. But you know what's being said by the people in that area who run educational institutions? How am I going to develop a workforce pipeline so that people who live here in North Carolina, I'm not saying we hating on Virginia and people coming across the line and get money because we do it to them as well, but how are we going to create that workforce pipeline here in North Carolina so we can have people who benefit locally? And again, not hating on people who commute, into our area to work or, because we commute to go into other counties, those of us from rural North Carolina. But, you know, again, it starts in high school or in middle school in terms of, okay, if you know that this plan has been here or is coming, how do we start preparing those children to be the workforce that they're going to need so local people can benefit from that?
Yep.
And
Thank
so
you.
when you think about that, those corporations, when they come here, they need to pay their fair share so that they can help prepare the workforce that they're going to benefit from in the future.
Right. Right. And their employees benefit from our public goods and services, right? If their employees, have really good public schools to go to and safe roads and infrastructure, that's a benefit to them. I'm going to go in reverse order. So I'll start with you again, Representative Pierce. I'd love for the three of you to talk about any legislation that you've introduced or co-signed that you're excited about that you want to share with us and our audience.
Okay, I got a few bills. It's about 30 some bills. I sent an email to
Okay, don't tell us all
no,
30.
no, I'm not going to. No, I was just telling people. I sent an email to, I think it was the Legislative Analysis Division, and they sent me like 30 House bills that revolve around K-12 education here in the short session. And so one of the ones that I jumped on was House Bill 1178, which is the North Carolina Teacher Pay Competitiveness Act. And being someone who's in the classroom, being someone who speaks with my colleagues about it, or, they come and talk to me about it. It's all about trying to make teacher pay more competitive in our state so that we can not only recruit but retain people. When we talk about these pay raises, what about the veteran teachers who miss out? Because a lot of those pay raises go to BTs, people in the early parts of their career. And if I'm in the early part of my career and I'm getting these bumps in pay, and then once I hit this plateau at like maybe 25 years, and I don't really see any other, kind of pay increases, it's like, why would I stay that long in the profession? If I'm not going to, receive that increase in pay just to be able to, again, maintain the cost of living. Another bill that I um, helped introduce is House Bill 1073, which is the Fair Share for Public Schools Act, which is backed by a group, I believe, called Patriotic Millionaires. Representative Alan Boyncy is kind of like the lead on that. He was the lead primary sponsor, but that's about asking millionaires, any income over $1 million, for a 7% tax to help fund public education in North Carolina. And when he asked me to be on it with him, I asked him, if we're going to do this, then we need to get more specific about what these funds are going to go toward because people want to see a ROI. They want to see a return on their investment. They want to see that, okay, these are going towards initiatives and programs that are going to produce the type of results that we want to see in our public schools, good test scores, kids not missing meals, kids getting the services they need in terms of, as you were saying, school psychologists, school support personnel, things like that. And then the last one, and I know Rep. Rubin, excuse me, is going to talk about this one, is the Voucher School Transparency Act, House Bill 1184. Um, you know, uh, We have people who go around and make sure that people are doing right by their finances in our state, but I've never known them to go and make sure that the voucher program is doing right by their finances. They've talked about going to do it because it's public money, but they haven't done it. So I won't hold my breath until that's done. But that's another one that I'm very, very interested in. The likelihood of it passing, I know, is very slim, but you can educate your child how you see fit. But if you're going to use public money to pay towards a private school education, then those types of standards of accountability and transparency should apply as well. And we need to make sure that we're getting the ROI on that money as well.
Absolutely. I mean, if the argument is all for parental choice, it would be better for parents to actually understand what they're choosing, right? And you can't do that if you don't have publicly available data and test scores, et cetera. Senator Waddell, what bills have you sponsored or signed on to that you're excited about?
I'm very excited about principals when they leave, that they can come back. And we had provisions for teachers where they retired and they didn't have to take continuing education, but they took administrators out. I'm very proud that we were able to put them back in and make sure administrators also receive that caveat of not
What,
having it.
what bill number is that? I want to make sure we advertise that.
I'm not looking at it right now, but I give it to you.
Okay, later, let me know and I'll send that in the email out to everybody because I really want to make sure we all clap on and raise yahoos for that.
Okay. And by the way, it did pass. So the other thing that I'm very proud of, and I've signed on to every time I see an education bill, I sign on to it. Master's pay is what we had been trying to get reinstated. We've been trying to also get reinstated additional counselors, additional social workers. They're basically needed. I think we've made some headway with school nurses, but we need more nurses. We think about when students come to school, they have a lot of health problems. Now, mental health is one of the things, it's kind of like new coming up. And the reason mental health is so important because a lot of things happen with kids in school and we don't know what's going on with them. So we got to focus on, when we think about additional counselors, also additional training so that availability is there for them to be able to recognize things that are going on with children that we didn't even know happened before. And most of all, longevity pay. We've been trying to get that for a long time. After spending so many years and retiring, we would get longevity pay. I got it. And it made a difference. You knew that when you retired, here's a lump sum of money. This is longevity pay because you've stayed with it. You've given your all. And now we're going to compensate you. And I think we need to look again, too. And as I said, every time I see one, I try and sign on to it, regardless to who brings it forward. Because things in education, that's how I spent most of my working life. It's so very important.
The master's pay and the longevity pay, it has now been 10 years, technically 11, since those things were taken away. So we appreciate you advocating for those things to come back because they do matter a great deal. Thank you, Senator Waddell. Representative Rubin, what bills are you excited about or have co-signed or filed?
Yeah, I'll talk about a couple and a couple that Rodney touched on also that I'm really excited about. I filed House Bill 1178, and I want to talk a little bit tell you the story of how that came around. You probably already know this because you're advocating in this space, but while we didn't have a budget, teacher pay raises just were frozen in limbo because you need a budget to get teacher pay raises. But somehow the voucher money grows automatically. It grows and gets bigger every year all the way into the 2030s. And at that point, it is automatic. No budget, no problem, still gets bigger. And so I was looking at the statute where they did that, and I got really tired of coming in and explaining to people how voucher money grows and teacher pay doesn't. And the thought was like, what if we flip it, right? What if the teacher pay grows automatically and the voucher money doesn't? And so that's the heart of what the bill is. It's a 7% increase up front in pay. And that one, unlike what Republicans are offering in the budget with their 8%, it's all the way across the teacher pay spectrum. So if you look at what the pay scale that is in that budget deal they're talking about, it benefits starting teachers a lot and it benefits senior teachers a lot less. This would benefit equally. And then it protects the funding stream. It's roughly a 3.7% pay raise automatically every year, even if we don't pass a budget indefinitely. It eventually gets tied to cost of living. That's meant to be a floor, by the way. The legislature could always do more in the budget and should do more. But the idea would be that, our inability to do our job in the legislature wouldn't penalize teachers. That would just become automatic. And then, of course, it gets that money by dramatically scaling back the voucher program to what it was originally, where it's income based, where you had to have been in a public school. That's how you can get that money back. And then another bill that I think is a really good combination from it that Representative Cook filed, House Bill 1130, touches on a lot of the things that my colleagues have mentioned, restores master's pay. It also fixes the teacher pay scale. I know folks here are very well familiar with the fact that it has like all of a sudden year 15 to 24 is just one line on the pay scale. Her bill would actually make those individual lines in the pay scale. And so you would continue to get pay raises year after year. And then it has some really cool stuff. It has more planning time, a program where you can go work as a sub, as like a sabbatical once you've got enough experience to try other schools and other teaching roles. And maybe that's something you want to move into. And then the last one I'll mention, the School Voucher Transparency Act, which Representative Pierce covered really well. We are the only state that I've been able to find that lacks all five of the sort of standard accountability factors for voucher money. Those are be accredited, use state approved or equivalent curriculum, have licensed or certified teachers, participate in state testing, and meet the minimum instructional time requirements. We don't require any of those things in North Carolina. It's the most unaccountable voucher program in the country.
Yes.
And, these bills, and I saw folks also talking about them being referred to rules immediately. Yeah, they're not going to pass. They will never move these bills forward while they control the General Assembly. And that is when in the House, when they get referred to rules, that means they don't intend to let it go anywhere. And we knew that filing them, but we're not going to be deterred because we're trying to set the path for what the right future would look like so that when we have the ability to move these bills forward, that's absolutely what we're going to do.
Thank you for making that point. I think those of us that are a little more in the weeds understand that when things get moved to rules, that it's kind of dead in the water. But I really appreciate what you're saying. You are elected, you're sent there by your constituents, all of you, to stand up for the values of your community and the values of what you believe in and campaigned on. And it really is beside the point what happens with these with leadership. It's important that you file them. It's important that you send those out into the community and communicate those. And there's power behind actually filing a bill, even if you know that it's not, going to go somewhere. And it's really unfortunate. You would think that we could get a common understanding and a common commitment to some basic accountability for this runaway voucher train that we have in North Carolina. And I apologize for my commentary, but Yvonne, did you have a question in the chat that you wanted to lift up?
Well, I will say that several of you have already been answering some of the questions, and that's really good. I did put in the chat the link to our website where we have Public Schools First, where we have a link on vouchers, and I really encourage you to go there. I want to just share with you really fast, and Len will, if you'll help me look at the questions while I'm doing so, but I think most of them have been answered. And what I may do in a few minutes is and I certainly invite you all to put it in the chat there because we can probably see it faster, in the chat because it seems like we're having a hard time. Tom Oxholm did have a question for the panelists, and he said it's about the need for significantly increasing funding. I would need to do it verbally to put it in context. Can you unmute me? Well, you know what? We're going to see if Yvonne has the skills to do that. Hang on. I don't know, but I'm going to try. While I'm trying, let me do one thing really fast. I really want to do this because our folks have done such a good job of talking about vouchers. Can you see my page here? And I want you to go here when you get a chance later and really delve into the information we have here, because it really points to what Phil and Dr. Waddell and Rodney have been saying. If you look here, for example, the voucher money spent in Wake County as of now, $185 million. Okay, and so you can look and see the impact. And the one thing that really aggravates us very much, and we hope you'll go and look at this report and read it, is how our tax dollars are being used to discriminate. And that's something that really bothers us. And one of the reasons they're allowed to do that, our elected officials can tell you, is because they have no rules. They have no accountability. There's no one they're reporting to. So let's see. I have said here, allow, okay, I'm almost with you, Tom. Hang on, I'm trying to figure this out. Allow, oh, okay. I'm having a hard time finding that. I'm sorry, Tom. But Lynn, if the rest of you will go on for a second and let me see if I can if I can free our panelists,
Sure.
I mean, our participants.
Our good friend Tom Oxholm has served on the board of the North Carolina Forum for Public Education. Oh my gosh, I just screwed up their name. But he is a strong, strong friend of public schools and public education in North Carolina. And we're so grateful that he's here. So we're going to figure out a way to get his question to you. But I wanted to confirm if I heard you correctly. I think it was Representative Pierce. You said, or maybe I don't remember, but House Bill 1130, did you say that getting rid of that plateau, that freezing, is that part of 1130? Did I hear that correctly?
That's right. Yeah, it has a pay
Fantastic.
scale for every year up to either 25 or 30. And it's like it gets the numbers get bigger every year instead of there being a sudden 10-year period where you don't get a raise.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so Tom and I have come up with a real clever way to do what, I used to call old school, where you just, and I'm going to, Tom's going to call me right now, and I'm going to put him on speaker. So give us a second here. And if anybody else wants to do that, I'll put my number in chat. Here he is. Okay, so Tom, can you hear me? Okay, hold on one second, and I'm going to make sure. Okay, go.
So first, Yvonne and PSFNC do a great job of informing the public. Thank you for all you're doing. And Glenn, thank you for your service to the school board. Representative Rubin and Pierce, thank you. Senator Waddell, thank you. That's hard duty. So I am spending my whole year trying to motivate business leaders to get engaged in this debate. I've met with over 200 in the last 2 months. They're all aghast at what's happened to public school funding over the last 15 years. And they all pledge to get actively engaged in the elections this year.
Sorry, not that mic, the phone mic.
Go ahead, Tom.
We all agree that the funding level of being 50th in the country is an embarrassment. Funding per pupil at $2 billion below Mississippi. $5 billion a year behind Virginia. And $8 billion a year behind South Carolina is inexcusable. And it will not lead to having good workforces, educated workforces in our state. So not only do we need to stop the future cuts, we have to put money back. And we'll be demanding people who are running for office do that this fall. Will that make you all uncomfortable in standing up for tax increases to put money back into our students?
So sounds like that, Yvonne, if you want to mute Tom, it sounds like that's the question. So that's pretty direct, but let's go for it. That's a fair question.
Happy to jump in or yield to anyone else who wants to go first. Ronnie, you want to go ahead? Go ahead.
No, I don't. The question was, do we have a problem talking about increasing taxes to fund public education, correct?
Right.
If I
Not just
all
to
told to.
replace things that have been cut, but to increase our funding.
Mm-hmm. I don't have an issue doing that. I think what's most important is that we have a plan of how that money is going to be spent. Because one of the things that is said currently is, oh, you just want to throw more money at the problem, right? And it's like, yeah, we do, but we have a plan of how that money is going to be spent. And that plan includes things, as I was saying earlier, that are going to get us the performance measures that people like to see. You don't want to see schools be low performing, even though, you might need to change the formula also to deal with that. You want to see students reading on grade level and things of that nature. We need to put those funds towards programs that we know are going to produce those results to kind of um, blanket the critique that we know is going to come. If we can show that this money is specifically going towards certain programs or initiatives that are not only going to increase pay for our employees, but also going to go towards programs that are going to impact student performance positively, and we're going to be able to show the results that, hey, this is the data that shows this has worked, and this is what we're going to use to do it, then I think that's fine. But we have to be able to message that and communicate that in a way where people who may be hesitant to pay those extra tax, not that they don't want to, but they're hesitant because they don't think that there's a plan to go along with it. I think that's the most important thing. I don't have an issue doing that at all, as long as we have the plan to go along with it on how it's going to be done.
And let me add a quick comment before Phil and Joyce jump in the comments, we're getting a lot of comments, right? Like people don't mind paying their fair share. It can part of this restoration is how I look at it, Tom. This restoration be fairly done to, as Dr. Waddell said, all spectrums of the class system and income levels, and corporate as well, business as well as individual. And one of the things that Phil, you mentioned at the very beginning about money and taxes and so forth, is some of it is stop the bleeding, stop the nonsense, and don't make any more. That's a restoration almost in itself, right? If we stop now. And then the other part is how do we restore some of this and do it fairly? So I throw it back to you what Tom said, but let's get that context in there because a lot of our folks are saying, is it going to be fair?
Yeah. I actually, on the question of sort of, do we run on increasing taxes to pay for this? I actually would argue no, in part because that is the only thing some folks will hear. They only heard the first half of that sentence, right? That you want to raise taxes and that's it, they're done. In a time when this election is going to be for so many people about affordability. But the good news with that is I actually think for the vast majority of people in North Carolina, we can raise that money to reinvest in education without raising their taxes one bit. In fact, they'll end up with more money in their pocket because we'll take pressure off of their property taxes. So House Bill 1073, for example, it would raise income taxes up to 7% for people that make over $1 million a year. So if you're watching this and you make $1 million a year, yes, I do want to raise your taxes, actually. For other people, actually, no. If you were to stop the corporate tax reductions, that saves about $3.7 billion a year. So what if we take that, right? Take that, do what we're doing in the Fair Share for Public Schools Act. We have this money. Oh, by the way, 600 to 800 million a year in voucher money, by the way, is also there. Like, there's ways we can do it that don't require us to stand up and say, hey, hear me out, I want to raise your taxes. Because I actually think we can do this without putting it on the back of working people. And that'll also happen to be a really good way to run in an election for it. But to the point of should we be pressuring every candidate running for are you going to do this? Absolutely. Anybody who can't make these promises for education in our future shouldn't be in the General Assembly.
All right, Dr.
Full stop.
Waddell, your turn.
I think we're going down a slippery slope here. When we ask those of us who are running in elections to take raising taxes as one of the issues
It's
for
hard.
education, because we're dealing with a lot of other things that affect education, and it's not always money. It's not always the raise in taxes that go for education. Other things support education. And if we're going to raise taxes, let's come back to our counties. You know, we have tier one, tier two, and tier three counties. I think we need to come back to the people before we jump out with that. Not, it may be a good idea. Let's come back to the people, the constituents, and they come from all walks of life. They are concerned about education. They're concerned about other things that contribute to a sound and basic education. And to run on that single issue, maybe something that we want to rethink. Let's come back to the communities. Let's come back to the constituents. See what they have to say, because after all, those are the people that we answer to. Those are the people that are going to be with us from the beginning and from the end.
So,
Let's,
Senator Waddell, do you feel like your constituents would have a problem or do have a problem with corporations paying zero in taxes, but
oh,
yet,
corporations paying zero. I think we've already addressed that.
Yeah.
right? Well, I meant
That's
looking at 2026. I meant that maybe that's a way to have that conversation, with constituents who really are concerned about their own taxes as they should be. That, can we agree that corporations should be paying their fair share?
oh, absolutely. I think we've addressed that. Corporations most definitely should pay their fair share. No,
Well, and Tom added in here, and if we paid 5% corporate income taxes the same way that Virginia does at 5%, it would be an additional 6.4 billion a year. See, that alone, that's why I really like the word restoration. We need to go back to a fair, equalitarian way of taxing businesses and individuals, and it needs to be based on fairness and equity, as Dr. Waddell is trying to say. And so I like looking at those kind of things. I really, really appreciated what you said, Mr. Rubin, about, look, there are some things we're doing with our funds right now that are not beneficial. I think I did just show you the chart on the voucher money, how much we have spent over $1 billion on private school vouchers for kids who are 87% of them already in private school anyway. Okay, with parents who chose that and can afford it. And so when you look at the corporate tax, when you look at cutting the taxes for the wealthy, and you look at these three or four things, you see, as you said, Mr. Rubin, we have the money. We're just making really bad policy choices. And that is what I think we need to tell the people and our constituents, right? We need to keep messaging and helping them understand these are some bad policies. As Joyce said, go back and talk to our communities and let them know these are the things that are taking the monies away from us and putting pressure locally on your counties for sales tax fees, property taxes, but also impacting your quality of life. So, um,
And if I
any
can,
other
if I
comments on
can
that, Rodney?
No, I was just going to add. I know that there's a young lady in the chat who said something about Senate Bill. I think it was 866.
Yeah, what is that?
Uh, Miss Carroll. It was like add homeschools to opportunity scholarships.
Mhm.
And then you have Senate Bill 990. I know Ahmed is on the call, and I did send you that email, Ahmed, like you asked. But Senate Bill 990, which looks like it wants to give the funding power uh, take it away from DPI and give it to the NC, what is it, NCSEAA? I can't remember, the North Carolina Education Assistance
Yes.
Authority. I
Yep.
can't remember the full acronym, but that's the program that basically administers the vouchers and also financial aid. So, in the story, he pointed out, Superintendent Green is a Democrat, runs DPI, elected to run DPI, statewide election. And then you have that group, which is mainly led by people who were appointed by Republicans. So it becomes a partisan issue. So it's like, if we can't beat you in a statewide election, then we'll take away the power of your office. Whether it's just gubernatorial, whether it's, educational or whatever, we'll take away the power of your office or we'll underfund you. And you'll have to start eliminating positions
Yeah.
in your department. So, that's unfortunately those bad policy choices that are being made at this time by the majority party. Things like that.
And they talk a lot about waste, fraud, and abuse. We're hearing that phrase all the time, right? But like the voucher program, even if you want to have a voucher program, the one that we have in North Carolina is waste, fraud, and abuse. There's not even an attempt to understand whether we're getting a return on investment on that. We're just shoveling money over to it. And I think I saw somebody pointing this out in the chat about a private school that had raised its tuition by the amount of the voucher. That's more common than not. I probably got this information from public schools first because I relied on this. I did a video on this not that long ago, and y'all's information was incredibly helpful. But schools that don't take vouchers between last school and this school year saw their tuition rise 4.5%. Schools that do take the taxpayer funded vouchers, it went up 15.8%. Triple the increase. I used to say that the voucher money was increasingly going to rich kids. It's actually increasingly not going to them. It's going to the people who run the schools because the tuition has just gone up by the amount of the voucher. That's the kind of like waste of government money that we should be hammering on. Like that is just straight up wasteful, and it's a lot of money. The bill to make the teacher pay grow up automatically instead of the voucher money. A lot of the money for that comes from defunding the voucher program. That's like $5 billion we're spending on that by the early 2030s. It gets close to $1 billion a year by the end of the 2020s.
Yep.
That's how much money is at stake.
And when you talk about the budget situation, Phil and I can speak to this on the House side. We both sit on General Gov Appropriations. And I will never forget, the morning we got the budget, which was the day or two before we were supposed to vote on it. We got it that morning, and I'll never forget, Phil was like, "Hey, with respect, we just got this. How do you expect us to go through it and have basically a good analysis of what we're actually doing?" But we were literally told, I know someone asked the question, but we were literally told prior to budget negotiations last year that if you want to fund something, if you add an amendment where you want to fund something, you need to find something to cut in another area. And I wanted to keep the hub office open in the Department of Administration. And I ended up wanting to cut money out of a program at Wake Forest University. And Representative Brown, who represents part of Forsyth, was like, she's a Democrat. She was like, "I can't do it, Pierce. I just can't do it. I can't vote for it. I can't vote for it." And she put me on the phone with the gentleman who was in charge of the program. And we talked for about 2 or 3 minutes. And he was like, "Sir, I understand what you're trying to do, but I can't support you in it." And I said, "You know what, sir? I get it. We're just going to have to agree to disagree." And of course, the amendment got voted down in committee. But I'm assuming if there is any attempt to allow us to have any kind of input in terms of amendments, we're going to be pretty much asked to do the same thing. Okay, you want this funded? Find another cut somewhere else. And if it's something that they don't want cut, like the voucher program, because I'll never forget another educator, Lindsay Prather, Representative Prather, wanting to fund North Carolina Promise, which is the community college program, to the tune of like 40 or $43 million, and taking that money out of the voucher program, and nope, they wouldn't let you do it. So that's where, we target a lot in terms of when we try to find money to fund programs that we want on this side of the aisle, because that's where a lot of it is going. And like, Representative Rubin was saying, you don't have those accountability measures in there. So it just looks like, a wasteful, fraudulent, or abusive program.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And usually when you start looking at that budget, there are some things that you really agree with, some things that you fought for, and they are there, like district attorneys in our various counties. that they have been fighting for a long time. And so when you have something there that's pleasing and a lot of other things that you don't want, you have tough decisions to make. Then you have a lot of explaining to do to your constituents because they're going to be looking at some things that they didn't agree with. So it's a give and take throughout the budget and throughout that budget process. And just getting it a day before you have to vote on it? No, that's almost unacceptable. You don't even have time to digest it. You don't have time to go back to your constituents. You don't have time to go back to the departments that you're responsible for, those that who campaign so hard, and those that you advocated for. You don't have the time. You're going to stay up to 2 a.m. in the morning deciphering it because you just saw it. We got to do a better job.
Yes. Thank you, Senator. Senator, do you want to start closing us out by tell us what we can do to help you and support our public schools? What are some things that we can do to help you?
I think what has been very helpful is coming to the General Assembly. And that was a group that was I talked with in the hallway. And we were just finishing a committee meeting. And I'm like, had I known you were going to be out here, you could have been speaking to to those people in this committee about the things that you're saying now. Then they can hear it from you, the constituent. We can hear it from you, those people who are working every day and making a difference. And oftentimes there come the rules, but the people we need to hear from are not there. That is the one most important thing that I can see. The cards, the letters, that's important. And we'll hold press conferences for you. We'll make that happen. Just let us know. So we're all in this together. We must collaborate, communicate, and speak to each other without being critical. Sometimes we'll see the things that we're most critical of. And if there's things that you saw that went well, we're like, praises too, that they went well and that we can do more of. But the one thing that I would say, come, speak to the committees when they're discussing the things that you're involved in. We had one group who came from the coast. When they were trying to do some things that they didn't agree with, they came in large numbers. And I tell you what, those fishermen, people who were dealing with shrimp, all of a sudden, you didn't see that legislation coming forward anymore. And I can say, when they ask us to do things, and sometimes it's just one person, and sometimes I'll say to them, are you representing a group? Are there other people in your midst who believe or would be in favor of what you're saying? And that you're not just speaking solo. Are there others? Let us hear from them too. Do you have a petition? Do you have those numbers? And also, sometimes constituents will come, they will ask, but they don't think about money that has to go with things. And usually everything has a dollar. It has to go through finance before it can go forward. That's important too. Most of all. And when things pass and you're proud that they've passed, let people know. Don't just stop. Communicate and continue to communicate, continue to be open, and continue to let people know that we are trying. Sometimes we don't accomplish what you said, but we've made a difference.
Thank you so much. Representative Rubin, what can we do to support you in your work in advocating for public education?
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. This has been a really good conversation. And I think in terms of advocacy, the first thing I would say is don't give up. There are moments when it feels like they are not listening, the folks in power, and they do not care. And that is even true sometimes. But the Shrimpgate thing is really the perfect example because it showed how just a tidal wave of advocacy can actually make folks real nervous in the legislature, and that's actually how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to actually be really nervous when people get mad. That's what democracy is supposed to be like. And so I use that as I got over 1,000 emails about shrimp. There were only like 370 like shrimpers that were impacted by that bill, and I got over 1,000 emails. And I don't represent anywhere near any of that, right? And so I think that's something that we can. And there's a point in the chat about, do you think the teacher rally on May 4th was effective? Yes, absolutely. Both for building morale in this movement, but also because it's showing how many people are angry about this. And I do think that we're being heard. Not necessarily they're acknowledging that, but at 8% pay raise, again, it's not enough. It's not a long-term plan, but I think they're doing that because they realize that us being 50th in education funding is actually untenable, and that in rural counties in particular, it's becoming like a deep, deep, deep crisis. And if we can keep that pressure up, if we can keep that pressure up in rural counties, I think two things can happen. One is you can get wins even without change in power, get wins. And then the other is it could start to build a movement of maybe getting some folks to question, like, do I really just have to go along with the people who keep defunding the largest employer in my county? Like, maybe actually I should like not be with them, right? Maybe there's a different way to do this, and I can pressure them, and that will actually cause change in both parties to adopt those positions. And so all of this is to come back to my original point, which is advocacy does work. Where it can be frustrating for us is it doesn't feel like it works quickly, but that's how it is. It just takes time. And I'm just really grateful for everybody that's here and grateful to be on the panel. And thanks for having me.
Rodney, you're
I'm
last.
so sorry. I was muted. I said, Representative Pierce, what you got? How can we help you
Oh,
support your work for public
uh,
education?
thank you again for having me on this panel discussion with two of my colleagues I hold in very high regard. And I would echo what they've said. And everybody's talking about Shrimpgate. Well, I'm going to talk about Watergate 2.0. When Section 5 of Senate Bill 214 was going to give Franklin County the ability to go into Halifax, Vance, and Warren and take property, acquire property by condemnation or some other method, um, property in those three counties of Halifax, Vance, and Warren without the consent or approval of our county commissioners. And it's so funny. I have to tell you the story. I woke up that morning. We knew 696 was going to be on the calendar. That was the Medicaid rebase bill. We already knew how we were going to vote on that. And I saw 214. I clicked on it. I read section 5. I had to read it two or three times because I said, my eyes are deceiving me. I know I don't see what I think I see. And I called Rep Rubin. I said, Phil, I said, I need you to back clean up today. He said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I was going to speak on the Medicaid bill. I said, Phil, you know how you're going to vote on that. I know how we're going to vote on that. You don't need to say anything about that. I need you to back clean up on this bill. I said, read section 5. And when he read it, he was like, oh, wow. And I was like, yeah. I said, we're going to come with some pain today. I need you to back clean up because that's what you're very good at, being a former federal prosecutor. Nail them. Nail them. And not only section 5 of that bill, but section 7 was going to basically shorten the terms of people who were elected to the Forsyth County Board of Education or Board of Commissioners. If you got elected to one of those boards in 2026, you were going to have to run again in 2028. They were shortening your term from 4 years to 2 years. So Representative Amber Baker spoke on that on the floor, and Speaker Hall pulled the bill and put it. That was on a Wednesday. He said, we're going to vote on this on Tuesday of next week. And that gave us the time that we needed to organize. And we had a big press conference. People came, they had T-shirts, they had signs. Um, People were going around to all the offices. People were online. Who do we contact? Sending emails, calls. I mean, it was just there were stories written about it because it was so egregious and brazen that you would put something like Section 5 in a bill, sneak it in there at the 11th hour, and think nobody was going to catch it. And so, to echo what my colleagues have said, particularly Senator Waddell, show up. Let them know, let us know, excuse me, that you are paying attention. And I think the one thing that I'm encouraged by is that I see more and more people paying attention to what is going on politically. Because I think they know things have been done or are going to come into effect that are going to hurt them, hurt their families, hurt their communities, hurt their schools, hurt their hospitals. We're talking about Medicaid and agreements that have to be reached between different companies. And, there's risk of rural hospitals closing. And people who have certain insurance plans can't go to certain places right now because there's not an agreement between companies that, cover healthcare expenses. So stay engaged. Let us know that you are engaged. Let us know that you are watching. Send those emails, make those phone calls, send those letters. Visit not only the offices of your representatives who actually are your representatives or senators, but go into the offices or try to visit the offices of these people who sit in leadership, these committee chairs. Because if I have a bill, or if Rep. Rubin or Senator Waddell has a bill, and that committee chair does not want that bill to be heard, that bill is not going to be heard. They hold the power on whether or not a bill gets heard in committee, whether it's put on the agenda to be heard, and whether it will advance.
That's a
So,
great point that we should still show up at in those offices. Well, I thank you all so much for you're busy. We know that you've got a full schedule, being in session, especially with the budget coming out this week. So we're very, very grateful that you took some time out of your evening to join us. And for our attendees, you see here that we've got the emails and telephone numbers for our representatives here. You can contact them directly. I know they'd love to hear from you. And we will have this webinar, as Yvonne said, it's been recorded, and we put all of our webinars on our YouTube channel. Yvonne, if you want to advance to that next slide, this is how you can get in touch with Public Schools First NC. Our YouTube channel is listed there. And we just did a webinar about Leandro. So we've got some great content, and we hope you'll find us there, and then on all of these other social media platforms. Yvonne, did you have anything you wanted to add before we end?
Yes, I would just like to echo your comments, Lynn, and thank our panelists and all our guests for being here tonight. Please know that one of the things that we have to keep doing, and that's what Senator Waddell encouraged us to do and everyone else, is we have to stay engaged. We believe that the more information you have, the facts you have at hand, that these are the kind of things that can help you advocate, whether you're on the phone or in person or you're emailing, having that information. And so we dedicate our lives almost to pulling together information, facts, figures, and sticking them on our website. You're welcome to print them, copy them, use them in any way you can to advocate. Remember that in almost every county in our state, public education school system is one of the top employers. They are the economic engine of so many rural and small counties. This effort to undermine and destroy public education is going to really hurt those mid-sized, small, rural, low-income counties. And I think that getting the information out to their commissioners, to their school board members, to their city council members, to help them understand the impact that's going on Jones Street. I would just say that Mr. Pierce kind of said it really well at the beginning. A lot of us are so busy trying to get through each day, raise our family, take care of our grandchildren, keep a job, protect our health, that it's hard to stay so engaged. But we are here to help you. These three people are offering to also help you and be a resource for you. Please keep sharing information. Please keep coming to our website and our Facebook page and getting what we can. If there's something that would help you in your advocacy, email us, info@publicschoolsfirstnc.org. Lynn does a lot of virtual workshops all over the place, bringing information into PTAs, church groups, civic groups, Rotary clubs. We're here to be a resource for you. And if you would like us to present something to your group, let us know. Give us an email and we will do everything we can to accommodate you. If there's some information you can't find on our website, shoot us an email. We'll help you find it. If we don't have it, we'll go looking. Okay, so thanks to all of you. Thanks for being public education advocates and supporters. And the best thing you can do for public education is be a smart voter in November and vote for candidates that support public education. Good night, and thank you all for joining us.